Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next episode of Next Agriculture. Today we have a special guest, Joel Michael, who's on his journey to empower 1 billion farmers' life across India and Africa through his organizations Circularity and Ocean and Us. Today we're going to talk about his journey, his plans, and we'll elaborate a little more how he is actually planning to change that. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for joining. It's a pleasure to have you here
It is an
in
absolute pleasure.
person. And I'm really glad to dive into what you actually and your organization is doing.
Thank you so much for having me, and that's a great introduction. I'm very humbled. Thank you.
Tell us, of course, circularity is really something that we hear a lot lately, but I'm not sure that everyone understands it clearly. So let's talk a little bit about what circularity is about.
Sure thing, absolutely. Like you've rightly said, it's the word of the year. It's a buzzword now from sustainability. We've gone into circular economy.
Mhm.
That's where the word circularity is derived from. In simple words, it basically just summarizes that life comes full circle. So, if you want to understand circular economy or circularity, just look to nature. Nature has zero waste. Everything that nature produces goes back into nature, being nature consuming it and then
Interesting.
recreating life with it. So, if you take plastic waste or agricultural waste, or if you take metal waste, what a circular economy is essentially creating an infinite loop around producing and manufacturing stuff not just for recycling but for reuse thereafter, and not just a one-time reuse but a reuse in perpetuity, if I might. So think of it this way: there's a single cycle where most of the current uh, tech companies in sustainability thrive, which is where they say that something can be recycled. So, recyclable clothing, recyclable hoodies, recyclable XYZ. What happens after you're done consuming it the first time? Then no one thereafter knows how you've disposed of it.
Mm-hmm.
And a
Correct.
circular economy is to make sure anything ever manufactured or put out in this world remains in an ecosystem where it doesn't need to end up in a landfill, doesn't need to end up in the ocean, doesn't need to be burnt or incinerated, unless, of course, for energy. But that's what a circular economy is.
Wow, that sounds really fantastic. How realistic is that? How can we achieve that?
It is a process that requires a lot of innovation, policy, and collaboration. Why I am a fan, particularly of a circular economy, is because I get asked a lot where, how do I deal with competition, or who do I think are my competitors? And I personally believe that if you're trying to solve what I think is the biggest problem, which is climate change, as an entrepreneur, there's no one tech company or one entrepreneur or one country, for that matter, who can solve climate change. And somehow we still do not have a very thriving network or community in sustainability. Think about it. You have thriving communities, events where everybody comes together to talk about the future of AI
Mm-hmm.
and how they can come together, and fintech, and how they can support one another. In sustainability, you have the COP events, you have the UN events, but everybody's still battling for a piece of their share. Everybody has the best carbon accounting tool. Everybody wants their credits to be sold on the market. Every registry says we are the most legitimate to register your project with us. But in a circular economy, you cannot thrive alone.
Mm-hmm.
The manufacturer is going to have waste. He needs a recycler. Both of them need someone to transport the goods effectively, efficiently. All of them need someone who's going to have use for that byproduct. And then there's the overarching technology of AI to monitor and take this data, make it more effective. You have blockchain to ensure transparency and traceability. You have government policy to subsidize all of this. And then you have credits to be able to get the entire broader ecosystem to participate. So, from a realistic standpoint, I think it is absolutely essential because you cannot offset waste like you can with carbon. If someone plants a tree somewhere because I get on a flight, there is a certain offset. But If I throw my trash out on the street,
There's no offset.
someone needs to pick it up and do something about it.
That's really interesting, and I can see clearly the positive effect it can bring to the whole of our planet. My question here would be, how close are we to that? I mean, who are the main stakeholders, or who is the best role model for you when you talk about circularity? Is there any particular company? Is there any particular country that we can look at and learn? Or are we still, all of us, at the first steps of development of circularity?
I think we're at a stage where a lot of governments and startups have taken, I wouldn't say a first step, but a very first broad leap into building and fostering a circular economy. For example, Singapore boasts of close to zero waste. They take all their waste and they produce energy from incineration, which
Like
is
all of it?
I would say over 90% of it.
Wow.
And that, to me, is a remarkable example of how this can be done efficiently and effectively. A lot of Norwegian countries are focused on ensuring single use is eliminated entirely. Europe is massively focused on even something as simple as your cell phones, where it's going back to the day and age where they're saying you should be able to replace your battery. Repair is essentially a form of circular economy. So it's happening. I think, I'd like to throw a certain few names out there like Circulaze and Circular, which are companies that have created groundbreaking technology where they actually do something like a digital product passport, where essentially it works like a passport. The visa stamps give you a timestamp on where you've traveled to. Think of that for a product. Gives you exactly what the life cycle of a product has been, from manufacturing to consumption to reuse and so on and so forth. So it's happening.
Oh, great. I still feel that as circularity, it might sound something very far today, but that looks like something we can't avoid. We'll still have to do that.
Yep.
So I'm really glad we have this conversation today. Back to your company, back to your organization. Tell us exactly what you do.
So circularity is a result of what a typical entrepreneur is trying to do: solve a problem. And initially, the company you first mentioned is the company I first founded, called Oceans and Us, and we were building robot boats
Wow.
that essentially cleaned up water bodies, rivers, lakes, oceans. Think of it as the Roomba in your house that goes and finds the waste, cleans it and collects it and comes back to the dock, and then you empty it. And that's what the boats are doing. We're going to deploy 3 boats in India in the next quarter, and 3 lakes are what we're targeting to ensure are completely waste-free. But when we were doing this, we came across a major problem where removal is one part of the problem solved.
Where do you take it?
Where do you take it? And there are a lot of people who would gladly take it, but unfortunately, not everyone wants to tell you what they do with it. And to me, recycling is such a broad term. What is it? Is it incineration? Is it shredding? Is it shipping it to an Asian country? What really is recycling? So unless we can track and trace, there's 100 tons of X amount of waste, plastic waste that went in, and maybe 90 tons of a byproduct, construction material, came out on the other side. Who used it? And what was it used for?
Clarity on
there's
that.
no clarity. So then we decided, saying we will try and foster and facilitate the clarity. And that's where we created Circularity to essentially become a blockchain transparency enabling platform to show complete product life cyclability. And then we realized that the whole carbon credits dynamic doesn't really support a circular economy. The closest thing is a plastic credit. And a plastic credit essentially incentivizes you for 1 ton of plastic removed and 1 ton or the same ton of plastic recycled. Now, unfortunately, as the term actually means credit, the word credit is an incentive.
Yep.
It's not an extra income or revenue on your business model. The biggest need for an incentive is in reuse. Removal and recycling have been established for decades. We've done it right. But neither is a sustainable business model unless there is a reuse market.
Correct.
And we needed a third credit for the ton reused. That's why we wrote policy and framework with Peterson Control Union for close to a year around three elements of a credit forming a circularity credit: the activity of removal, recycling, and reuse.
Wow.
So that's what it does. And as of today, we are a registry that if you do any of the three activities, you can come register on a circularity registry and earn credits for the activity you do, complete blockchain traceability. And lastly, what we also enable through the registry is the trade of these credits. So there are companies who are in the business of manufacturing, and you can almost never go zero waste with manufacturing.
Correct.
And certain elements, for example, plastic is the big evil in the industry, but it has also revolutionized so many industries like healthcare, and it is an important component. So if you cannot completely replace plastic, and it is an important element that you have to manufacture, you have now the option to ensure that you buy circularity credits where someone else will ensure that an equal amount of plastic is removed from the environment and is then recycled.
Wow, that's that's a very interesting and complex approach. Good job with that.
Thank you.
And so, if I understood it correctly, there's ways how I can remove waste, recycle, reuse, and I get credited for that.
Yes. Yes.
And where can I spend those credits? Is it fixed, the area where I can spend those credits as a farmer, as a waste producer, or waste recycler?
No. So with carbon credits in Article 6, you are restricted to certain geographies.
Yes.
With circularity credits, we haven't restricted anybody because manufacturing is usually almost outsourced.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be right for you to claim offset in your geography when all your manufacturing is happening in China or India or Sri Lanka for that matter. So all circularity enables is to ensure whatever you put out as a consumer or as a business or as a government, it's easier to measure, unlike carbon, because waste is tangible. A ton of waste is a ton of waste universally.
Correct.
So when you put out a ton of anything, we just ensure through the purchase of these credits, an equivalent ton is removed from elsewhere at that point in the planet. So it's a planet going circular, not a geography.
Nice. I mean, wow, amazing. I believe that we'll be seeing a lot of climate techs this year because, once again, we have to, because climate crisis is definitely making our life worse and worse. What's your perspective? Do you see an uprise of climate tech startups all over the world?
I firmly believe some of the next big unicorns will be climate tech startups.
Is there any yet?
There are a few that I think are very close.
Okay.
Yeah. I think obviously if you look at the big ones in EV space and space mining or space cleanup of debris and stuff, it from a broader perspective falls on the climate tech angle. But so we're not going to take those into account. But if you look at the new age climate tech startups, which are predominantly focused on circularity or focused on direct air carbon capture or focused on alternate material science, etc., we're very close to seeing significant amount of capital and startups coming out from there.
As we've already discussed, perspective of my podcast is mostly on agriculture. Yeah. So from this amazing circularity thing, I would love to take your focus a little bit more closer to agriculture. I know that you work with farmers in India.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more? What are the general challenges they are facing, and then we will narrow it down.
Okay.
And let's talk then later on how the waste picking can benefit farmers in India and elsewhere.
Absolutely. So, as you probably are aware, India is one of the largest agricultural hubs in the world. It is known to be either the first or the second largest producer of most fruits, most grains. It is predominantly an agricultural-based population. Over 40% of the employment is in the agricultural sector. If you look at marginalized communities, it's above 70%. So a lot of income and households depend on agriculture as a source of not just food, but also livelihood. However, that being said, the farmer community in India has not always, I would say, been very successful in terms of seeing financial prosperity. In fact, one of the most horrendous statistics, you've probably heard me say this a lot, is where we have anywhere between 30 to 50 farmer suicides every single day in the country. And I'm sure if it's not as horrendous as a number, other geographies and countries also experience a certain amount. But I wouldn't be the right person to comment on that. But it's something that resonated with me. Not that I have an agricultural lineage or background, but it's just something that I couldn't get out of my head when I heard it. And to me, trying to solve climate change, which eventually is to save people.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have 30 to 50 farmer suicides every single day, and your narrative is around saving the planet, how can you ignore this? So I was very keen to understand if there is a way to bridge these two. And we managed to, at least to a certain capacity. And I genuinely believe that at least in my lifetime, I will be able to significantly drop that number.
And your goal is 1 billion. 1 billion
My
farmers.
goal is to impact the livelihood of 1 billion farmers.
That's amazing. I wish you all the best luck.
Thank you.
Timeline-wise, how does it look? When is the 1 billion milestone reached?
So the 1 billion milestone is a milestone that obviously is very far-fetched. But given the right collaboration, there's good people. There's good people in the world. There's a lot of people whose heart is in the right place and they want to be able to contribute.
Mm-hmm.
Given the right partnerships, the right support, the right collaborations, I think we'll get there. It's still, I think it's about 2 decades away, I would say, if I'm being realistic in today's timeline. But I genuinely believe we'll get there.
I ask that because I need you to make a promise. Once you reach that 1 billion, we do another podcast here.
Well, hopefully then
in India, anywhere else.
Well, then there's better reason to do it earlier.
Absolutely. Great. So tell us a little bit more about the life of an Indian farmer. You said there is this big amount of suicides per day.
Yeah.
What are the root of the problem? How do you see it? And what can be changed from entrepreneur perspective or from policy perspective? What's causing it?
Well, see, I wouldn't want to generalize and say that every farmer is got a terrible life or is not rightly compensated. There are farmer cooperatives in the country, like Sayadri Farms or Hindustan Agro, which are doing absolutely fantastic work for the farmer community. It's a farmer cooperative, so everyone actually has a piece of the entity. It's like owning shares, and everyone grows together. And they're rightfully participating in carbon credits, they're rightfully participating in innovation in agricultural practices. Agri-tech is booming to support all of these farmers as well. But that being said, the major community doesn't really get what they do. And by that, what I mean is, between the farmer and you who walks into a Carrefour or a Waitrose or any supermarket, you're essentially dealing with 5 to 9 middlemen between the farmer and the customer. And if you take any industry, which is, in a way, for a broader term, a marketplace business model, food delivery, Uber, etc., the platform takes the minimal percentage, except with agriculture, where the producer gets the least amount of percentage. So that's where the problem is. So what we're trying to do, as complex as it might be, to be able to narrow down the number of middlemen, because these farmers have sort of been through so many programs and initiatives where they've lost trust in a certain system or in certain people, that they're very cautious about being taken advantage of. So they just want to make sure they have food on the table and they get paid and the stock is bought. And that takes nothing away from government initiatives. I think India does amazing work as a government to subsidize and support farmers. A lot of efforts, a lot of initiatives have been actively rolling out for the last several years in the country. But we went a different angle. To be able to win the farmer trust, we went a route which the farmer has already discarded out of his brain, which is waste.
Yep.
And to be able to tell a farmer saying, hey, you're meeting me for the first time, believe me, give me your produce and I will help you make more money, is not as easy as it might seem. But telling the farmer saying, you have to pay someone to take away your waste, and we understand why you don't do that and go burn it instead. We're coming and telling you now, don't burn it because that causes an environmental impact. Don't pay someone to take it. We'll take it for free. And then we'll figure out what we have to do with it, and we'll share that revenue with you, is a completely different approach.
It is. It is. I bet there's a very clear value proposition right there. So farmers, instead of dealing with it, they can actually make money out of it. Now I can see how 1 billion can be reached faster than 2 decades. Tell me about the technology. I'm really interested. As you've said, India is a massively agricultural country, and more and more in different exhibitions in different places, I see a lot of Indian produce. What is the technology level in agriculture in India? Because if you take statistic-wise, India is on the second place among by amount of agri-tech startups.
Yes.
Which is a great thing. They are right after United States, and Spain is following India, but with a big gap. So all of these agri-tech startups, how much of them are being deployed internally? What's the adoption rate among Indian farmers of those technologies?
It is one of the highest I have seen. And I say this because the approach has been correct. And I think, here's my understanding of it, and I could be wrong, but my understanding is that unlike other technologies, most of the technologies in the agri-tech space that have been deployed in India have been homegrown.
Correct.
And because it is homegrown, they have perspective. So because of that, almost no one has gone with an approach to monetize the farmer. They've gone with an approach to give to the farmer by monetizing the ecosystem, which is our approach as well. So I think that, to me, will have a direct influence on the adoption rate.
Just because it's made for farmers, adoption rate.
It's a farmer-first approach. And I'm not sure if you've ever been, but you should go. India is... When people say India, what they don't realize is it's like saying Europe. It's very broad, it's very vast. Every 200 kilometers, the language changes, the food changes, the clothing changes, the way people communicate and live changes, the terrain changes. We see everything from snow to rainfall and burning hot summers. So dealing in India is very diverse. And because of that, it is very important to understand the dynamic. And in saying so, despite the political differences, despite the language barriers, despite all of that, multiple religions, multiple languages, the one thing that unites the country is the farmer. It's the nucleus of the country. It is one aspect on which no political parties are divided. No religion has an opposing opinion. And no two states have a conflict. So whenever you say it's for the farmer, the country unites and the country cares. And I think that's one of our biggest advantages in being able to scale this.
It's obvious, and we can see the progress done lately. It's amazing. And most of European countries cannot even catch up or get even close to what India is doing in terms of agri-tech. And I'm pretty sure it will be translated into better productivity. It will be translated to more sustainability. So I'm looking at Indian market very actively to see, because it's going to be a great success case, how technology has basically influenced the GDP of the country. And India is a great example. Thanks for sharing that. We are getting towards the end of the conversation. So I have two points left for you. Okay. One would be, And I'm super proud, and a lot of existing or new upcoming entrepreneurs who want to start their life in agri-tech or climate tech or green tech. There's so many related techs in this field are watching us. So what would be your advice to the new or existing climate tech entrepreneurs?
I would say go for it to begin with. Till about a few years ago, sustainability as a department in any organization was dealt with the CSR
Correct.
department. So when anyone said they were doing something for the environment, it was considered as a not-for-profit or a foundation organization approach. It's completely different today. Today, it's not something that is a good to do. It's not an outreach where the company sends their employees once a year to clean up a beach. It's a must-have. Every organization now has to make a commitment in most countries towards an environmental impact, towards their footprint, towards their ESG reports every year. There couldn't be a bigger opportunity at this point. Like I said, if you're a thoroughbred entrepreneur for all the right reasons, you are wired to solve a problem. There is no bigger problem right now than climate change. And if that's the one you're tackling, the opportunity is as big as the problem.
Nice, nicely said. I'm pretty sure it's going to inspire some of the
I hope so.
entrepreneurs who are thinking where to start their career or what to dedicate, where to dedicate their next decade or two.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joel. And one last question that we have as
Please.
a tradition. I'm kind of collecting our guests' perspectives of next agriculture because we're definitely seeing a transformation, and now AI is into the game too.
Yes.
So, generally speaking, let's say it's 2050. What does agriculture look like to you?
2050. 2050
is.
seems far off, but I think
You've reached your 1 billion
Yes.
already.
I think people will not focus so much on heritage practices where a certain geography has grown a certain crop because the father did it or because the grandfather did it. I think with the data they were collecting, with AI analyzing and predicting data for the future, and this is going on the levels of not just satellite imagery but actual sensors in the ground, soil content, water content in the soil, predicting weather forecasts with the changing climate. All of this will be able to tell you, saying, you know what, this soil or this piece of land is good for coffee for the next 4 years, after which it could change to maybe rice if you do XYZ, after which it could maybe change to something else. And that essentially is where it could be, I wouldn't say seasonal, but it could be for a certain period where it's not just purely profit driven, but it's based on data that tells you what you should actually be growing. And with people like you who are also helping the educational angle to these farmers would be more broad in their horizon of understanding what else they can grow. And there's sustainable agricultural practices to foster and facilitate that. So I see a world where the produce is driven by demand. And in that way, you ensure fair wage pay, you ensure zero waste, and you ensure consumption is driven in a sustainable, scalable manner. And that, again, translates and trends to water consumption, pesticide use, and so on and so forth. Which, again, if I might add, since you mentioned 2050, I see a future where if we're sitting as a consumer in a restaurant and I'm looking at a menu and I'm looking at so much as the protein content, so much as the carb content, so much as the fat content, I would also like to see how many pesticides were used on my tomatoes, in what conditions did my spinach get stored, and what was the fertilizer and the seed and the quality of actual production from the farm to my plate. And then that's how I think I would consume, because organic, again, it's such a broad word.
It is.
But to me, I would like to know what that actually means in my plate.
Wow. That's an interesting future to live in. Thank you very much, Joel, for your time. It's always nice to meet you
Likewise.
and talk to you. And I'm waiting for our next episode after certain milestone of
Abs-
farmers are rich. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.